Willowbrook Creek Estates presented itself as an oasis of tranquility, a carefully orchestrated symphony of agreeable beige tones, precisely edged lawns that resembled chemically dependent carpets, and an almost unnerving absence of spontaneous neighborhood noise. Driveways were swept, mailboxes stood at uniform angles, and the overarching silence felt less like peace and more like a held breath, monitored and enforced by unseen arbiters of acceptable suburban living. At the heart of this surveillance network, holding court from the Architectural Review Committee, was Margaret Sterling of number 14 Willow Lane, a woman whose physical rigidity seemed an outward manifestation of her internal inflexibility. Margaret viewed herself not merely as a resident, but as the sworn protector of Willowbrook Creek's essential character, a fragile construct built on aesthetic conformity and, increasingly, a narrow definition of who belonged. For the past 6 months, Margaret's formidable and often intrusive attention had become laser-focused on her new next-door neighbor at number 12, Ken Tanaka. To the casual observer, Ken was unremarkable, the epitome of quiet residency. He was a man of medium height, quiet demeanor, with dark hair and features that Margaret privately, and with burgeoning suspicion, cataloged as distinctly foreign. He listed his profession as freelance software consulting. His mid-range sedan was kept clean but wasn't ostentatiously new. His lawn, while consistently mown and edged, lacked the almost fanatical precision of Margaret's own botanical masterpiece. He kept to himself, offering neighbors a polite, reserved nod or a murmured morning during brief encounters at the mailbox or curb. He was, by most standards, an utterly unobtrusive neighbor. But Margaret Sterling did not operate by most standards. In her meticulously ordered worldview, Ken Tanaka's quietness wasn't modesty, it was secrecy. His reserved nature wasn't privacy, it was evasion. His Japanese surname, a simple fact of his heritage, became, in the echo chamber of her mind, a flashing red light signaling other, unknown threat. Willowbrook Creek, in Margaret's estimation, was a sanctuary for established families, for people who fit the unspoken profile, people whose lineages and allegiances were reassuringly familiar. Ken Tanaka, arriving alone, working odd hours from home, speaking infrequently, he was a dissonant note in her carefully composed suburban harmony, and Margaret Sterling detested dissonance. Her position on the Architectural Review Committee provided an initial, flimsy pretext for observation. Did his recycling bins conform to Regulation 17.cc? Was the trim on his shutters the precisely approved shade of off-white? But her scrutiny rapidly metastasized beyond the committee's purview. She began to watch him, her vigilance morphing from civic duty, as she defined it, into obsessive surveillance. From her front window, partially obscured by perfectly arranged lace curtains, she tracked his movements. His hours were irregular. Some nights, the blue glow of a computer monitor emanated from his home office window well past midnight. Other times, his driveway would be empty for 2 or 3 days straight, his house dark and silent. Visitors arrived occasionally, usually in late-model sedans with generic license plates, cars Margaret didn't recognize from the neighborhood registry. These visitors rarely stayed long, emerging sometimes carrying briefcases, exchanging few words with Ken on the doorstep before driving away. Once, she observed Ken pacing his fenced backyard while on a phone call, his voice low, almost inaudible, his back turned protectively towards her property line. To Margaret, steeped in a worldview increasingly colored by sensationalist news reports about economic espionage and online forums buzzing with conspiracy theories about foreign infiltration, These disparate observations coalesced into a terrifying, internally consistent narrative. The irregular hours weren't freelance flexibility. They were the hallmarks of covert activity. The visitors weren't clients or colleagues. They were handlers or co-conspirators. The private phone calls weren't confidential business discussions. They were coded dot transmissions. Ken Tanaka wasn't a software consultant. He was, quite obviously, a spy. Why else would he choose Willowbrook Creek? A single man of Asian descent, living alone in a family-oriented, predominantly white enclave. It didn't add up, unless the very ordinariness of the location was the point. A perfect cover. What secrets was he stealing? Was he targeting the nearby, though not that nearby tech corridor? Was he monitoring residents? Establishing a sleeper cell? Her imagination, untethered by facts, but fiercely propelled by xenophobia masquerading as patriotism, ran wild. She purchased a dedicated spiral notebook, labeling it Observations, 12 Willow Lane. Inside, she meticulously logged Ken's perceived activities. Subject returned 23:47 Tuesday. Unidentified gray sedan. License plate, recorded. Arrived 14:03. Departed 14:58 Friday. Subject placed trash receptacles at curb 05:15 Thursday, unusually early. Possible dead drop signal. She interpreted the mundane through a lens of high-stakes espionage, each detail confirming her pre-existing bias. The quiet nod wasn't politeness. It was cold calculation. The reserve wasn't privacy. It was proof of a hidden life. Her first official move was cautious, veiled. She raised concerns at the monthly HOA board meeting, speaking vaguely about unusual activity and potential security issues regarding number 12, hoping the board might initiate its own inquiry or perhaps find some rule infraction severe enough to pressure Ken. But the board members, long familiar with Margaret's tendency towards hyperbole and neighborhood micromanagement, listened with polite boredom. They thanked her for her vigilance, but stated that without concrete evidence of a rule violation or illegal activity, their hands were tied. The HOA president gently suggested she contact the police if she had genuine suspicions of criminal behavior. This dismissal only hardened Margaret's resolve. They were blind, complacent. It fell to her. Then, to protect Willowbrook Creek, she dialed the non-emergency police line, her voice filled with rehearsed urgency, reporting a highly suspicious individual at number 12, hinting darkly at potential anti-American activities and espionage. A patrol car arrived later that day. A young, polite officer spoke with Margaret on her doorstep, listening patiently to her breathless theories, then walked next door. He emerged a few minutes later after speaking with Ken, who had apparently answered the door calmly. The officer returned to Margaret, explaining that Mr. Tanaka had provided valid identification. His work as a consultant often required irregular hours and handling sensitive client data, and there was absolutely no cause for police concern. He concluded by gently advising Margaret against filing reports without credible evidence, reminding her of the resources wasted on baseless calls. Incompetence! Margaret fumed silently as the patrol car drove away. Or worse, perhaps Tanaka had already infiltrated the local authorities. Her paranoia deepened, twisting the officer's professional dismissal into further proof of the vast conspiracy she imagined Ken represented. If the official channels wouldn't act, she would have to employ other methods. She began a subtle, insidious whispering campaign. Catching Mrs. Davison by the azaleas, she'd murmur, "Doesn't that Mr. Tanaka seem, well, rather secretive to you? Makes you wonder what he's really up to, doesn't it?" Chatting with Mr. Henderson over the fence, She'd inject, "Have you noticed all those strange cars coming and going from number 12? Very odd. Some neighbors, like the pragmatic Mrs. Davison, politely changed the subject. But others, perhaps harboring their own latent prejudices or simply susceptible to Margaret's air of certainty, began to regard Ken Tanaka with a newfound wariness. Curtains twitched when he checked his mail. Conversations paused when he walked by. Margaret's harassment soon escalated beyond whispers. One morning, Ken found his meticulously swept walkway soaked, clearly from Margaret's wayward sprinkler, deliberately aimed over the property line. Official-looking HOA violation notices began appearing taped to his door with increasing frequency. A single weed visible near the foundation. Mailbox flag left up overnight, a rule universally ignored by everyone else. The precise shade of his welcome mat deemed non-compliant with Section 9. Paragraph D. Each notice required a written response. A minor but persistent annoyance. More disturbingly, Margaret took to making loud, pointed comments when Ken was within earshot in his own yard. Remarks about foreign agents undermining our country. The importance of vigilance against outsiders. The need to report suspicious activity, no matter how small. Ken continued to endure this escalating campaign with a remarkable, almost unnerving, patience. He responded to the violation notices politely and promptly. He cleaned the overspray from his walkway without comment. He ignored the pointed remarks, offering only his usual quiet nod if their eyes happened to meet. This stoicism, this refusal to react, only fueled Margaret's fury. In her mind, his unnatural calm wasn't resilience, it was the cool, calculated composure of a trained spy, further proof of his guilt. What Margaret Sterling, peering through her lace curtains, compiling her logbook of imagined transgressions, could never, ever have conceived was the truth, residing at number 12 Willow Lane. Ken Tanaka was living a double life, one steeped in secrecy and danger. But the flag he served was stitched with stars and stripes. Special Agent Kenji Tanaka, his official cover identity simply shortening his first name, wasn't just an FBI agent. He was a ghost in the machine. One of the Bureau's most senior and effective counterintelligence specialists. His entire career had been dedicated to the shadow war fought on American soil, tracking, disrupting, and neutralizing the efforts of foreign intelligence services attempting to steal state secrets, compromise critical infrastructure, or sow discord. His current assignment was the culmination of years of patient work, a deep undercover operation targeting a sophisticated and highly dangerous foreign espionage network. Intelligence indicated this network had established a covert communications hub, a vital node for transmitting stolen data back to their home country, somewhere within the sprawling, anonymous geography of Willowbrook Creek Estates or its immediate vicinity. Kenji's mission was to pinpoint that hub, identify the operatives, and gather the evidence needed to dismantle the entire network. His quiet house, his freelance consultant cover, his irregular hours dictated by surveillance schedules and clandestine meets with informants. They weren't suspicious anomalies. They were essential components of his meticulous tradecraft. The occasional visitors in nondescript cars were fellow agents or vetted contacts, exchanging critical intelligence. The private phone calls often involved encrypted communication devices, discussing sensitive operational details. His life was a carefully constructed illusion, designed to blend seamlessly into the background noise of suburbia while he hunted enemies hiding in plain sight. Margaret Sterling's escalating harassment, therefore, was far more than a personal annoyance. It was a direct, tangible threat to national security. Her constant, visible scrutiny created ripples in the placid pond. Kenji needed to remain undisturbed. Her calls to local police, while ultimately harmless, created unnecessary records, potentially drawing attention from the very foreign intelligence service he was targeting. Agencies known to monitor local law enforcement activity for signs of counter-surveillance. Her attempts to turn neighbors against him risked creating precisely the kind of local chatter that could inadvertently expose his presence or spook his targets. Kenji, trained in observation and threat assessment, recognized the danger Margaret posed almost immediately. He meticulously documented her actions, the surveillance, the false reports, the harassment, her clear xenophobic motivations, reporting everything up his chain of command through secure channels. He knew better than to confront her directly. Any interaction could be twisted, misinterpreted, or used against him, potentially jeopardizing the mission. His handlers at FBI headquarters shared his concern. Assistant Director Carmichael, Kenji's direct supervisor and a seasoned veteran of the counterintelligence wars, reviewed Kenji's reports with growing unease. This sterling woman, Carmichael noted during a secure briefing with the operational team leaders, is becoming more than a nuisance. She's a loose cannon rolling across a minefield. Her misguided vigilantism could inadvertently alert the primary targets. If they suspect scrutiny, they could sanitize the hub, scatter, and years of work go up in smoke. The Bureau's legal division explored options. Could they issue a cease and desist? Threaten charges for filing false reports? Possibly. But any direct intervention carried the significant risk of exposing Kenji's true identity and the nature of his operation prematurely. They couldn't afford to spook Margaret so badly that her resulting actions became even more erratic or public. For now, the strategy was cautious observation, hoping her obsession would wane or that she would overplay her hand in a less critical way. Margaret Sterling, however, was incapable of backing down. Convinced of her righteousness and frustrated by the inaction of local authorities and the HOA, she decided to bypass them entirely. She would take her evidence straight to the top, to the Federal Bureau of Investigation itself. She spent hours carefully compiling her dossier, her logbook filled with meticulously recorded timings and license plates, including the FBI front company plates. She couldn't know were fake. Photographs of Kenji checking his mail, printouts of online articles about foreign espionage rings, and lengthy, rambling letters detailing her suspicions and demanding immediate federal action. She addressed her packages to the nearest FBI field office, to Immigration and Customs Enforcement ICE, and, for good measure, to her state congressman. She envisioned herself a patriot, a lone whistleblower bravely exposing a threat ignored by official incompetence. Her packages arrived, joining the daily deluge of mail at various federal buildings. Normally, such missives, often lacking credible evidence and fueled by paranoia or prejudice, would be reviewed briefly by intake clerks and filed away under citizen correspondence or similar categories. But Kenji Tanaka's name wasn't just any name within the Bureau's systems. Due to his active, undercover status and his previous reports detailing Margaret's harassment, his name was flagged. When Margaret's letters, mentioning him specifically and repeatedly, landed on clerks' desks, internal protocols were triggered. Alarms, figurative but potent, went off. The letters were immediately rerouted from the slush pile, expedited through secure channels directly to the Counterintelligence Division at FBI headquarters. Landing squarely on the desk of Assistant Director Carmichael, Carmichael read Margaret's latest screeds with a heavy sigh that quickly turned into cold fury. The letters were a toxic stew of racist assumptions, wild speculation presented as fact, and demands for the investigation and deportation of the Japanese spy, Ken Tanaka. But interspersed within the rambling paranoia were details, timings, license plate numbers flagged as bureau assets, descriptions of Kenji's movements that proved she was actively, obsessively monitoring a highly sensitive undercover federal agent. Her actions weren't just misguided, they were actively dangerous, potentially compromising operational security at the highest level. He convened an emergency secure video conference with Kenji and the lead operational planners. Sterling has escalated, Carmichael stated grimly, holding up one of Margaret's letters. She's now petitioning federal agencies directly. Her evidence is garbage, but her persistence is becoming an active threat vector. She's drawing attention we can't afford. Kenji, his face impassive on the encrypted feed, reported. Her direct harassment has also increased. More violation notices, pointed comments. She tried questioning my landscaper yesterday about my schedule. It's making maintaining cover increasingly difficult. The primary target. Carmichael turned to the operational lead, the communications hub. What's the status? We've narrowed it down, the lead planner responded, pulling up satellite imagery and data overlays on a shared screen. High confidence the hub is operating out of 217 Orchard Drive. Rental property. Low-profile tenants match suspected operative descriptions. We've observed shielded antenna arrays being deployed nocturnally. Signal analysis confirms encrypted bursts consistent with foreign intel transmissions. We're finalizing the tactical plan. Recommend execution within 72 hours. Orchard ID. Just 3 blocks from Willow Lane. Close enough for Margaret's misguided antics to potentially disrupt everything. We have to neutralize the Sterling situation before the raid, the tactical lead stated firmly. If she causes a scene, spooks the Orchard Drive targets, neutralize how? Carmichael asked, rubbing his temples. Arresting her now, even on legitimate charges of harassment or filing false reports locally, creates noise. It could alert the network we're closing in. They monitor local police activity. A tense silence filled the virtual conference room. They were caught in a dangerous bind. Ignoring Margaret risked the mission. Acting against her also risked the mission. What if? Kenji offered quietly. We use her obsession against her. Carmichael raised an eyebrow. Explain. Agent Tanaka. The raid on Orchard Drive. Kenji elaborated. It will necessarily be overt. FBI tactical teams. Local police support. Visible activity. Margaret Sterling, given her mindset, will almost certainly see this activity. And given her fixation, her first assumption won't be the truth. It will be that we finally listened to her, that the FBI is moving on me. She'll likely try to approach the scene, insert herself, offer her evidence against Tanaka. Carmichael saw the strategy immediately, and when she does, when she actively interferes with a live federal operation, spouting her nonsense about you being the spy, especially potentially in front of media, then, Kenji finished, his voice devoid of emotion. You have undeniable public grounds for immediate arrest on federal charges, obstruction of justice, interfering with federal agents. It contains her, silences her, and does so in a context directly related to our operation, not her harassment of my cover identity, thus minimizing the risk of compromising the wider investigation sources and methods before the primary targets are secured. It was a high-wire act, relying on Margaret's predictable paranoia and arrogance. It meant allowing her harassment to continue for a few more days, allowing Kenji to remain under that pressure. But it offered the cleanest path to removing her as a threat at the critical moment without blowing the main operation wide open beforehand. All right, Carmichael decided after a moment's deliberation. It's a calculated risk, but it's our best option. The raid on 217 Orchard Drive is greenlit for 060 hours. Thursday, Agent Tanaka Maintain cover. Avoid Sterling at all costs. All units. Prepare for potential civilian interference at the perimeter. Specifically from Sterling. Standard protocols for handling interference apply, but if she obstructs the operation directly, arrest is authorized. The next 48 hours crawled by for Kenji. He maintained his routine, forcing himself through the motions of his cover identity, acutely aware of Margaret's eyes, seemingly always watching from number 14. He minimized time outside, kept lights low, used only secure communication lines. The pressure was immense. The culmination of years of work was imminent, yet threatened by the erratic behavior of one prejudiced neighbor. Thursday morning arrived, shrouded in the pre-dawn gray. The air was cool, still. Then, the silence of Willowbrook Creek was broken, not by the usual sounds of sprinklers or early commuters, but by the quiet, purposeful arrival of a convoy. Dark SUVs and vans, bearing the unmistakable silhouette of federal tactical vehicles, converged not on Willow Lane, but 3 blocks over, on Orchard Drive. Agents in full tactical gear, vests emblazoned with yellow FBI lettering, deployed swiftly, establishing a secure perimeter around number 217. Local police units arrived simultaneously, setting up roadblocks on the outer streets, managing traffic, keeping curious onlookers back. The operation was swift, professional, overwhelming. Lights, flash, commands were audible. The sounds of a controlled entry echoed briefly in the still morning air. Inside, a mobile command unit parked discreetly a block away from the raid site. Kenji Tanaka monitored encrypted communications, his focus absolute. His role was crucial, analyzing any last-minute signals from the hub, coordinating with electronic warfare teams, ensuring the digital evidence trail was secured. But on Willow Lane, Margaret Sterling was jolted awake by the distant sounds. The flashing lights reflecting off her bedroom window. She scrambled out of bed, heart pounding, a surge of vindictive triumph washing over her. They listened. They finally listened. The FBI was here. They were finally taking action against the spy next door. Her warnings, her letters, her tireless vigilance, it had all paid off. She had saved the neighborhood, perhaps the country. Fueled by righteous adrenaline, she threw on the first clothes she could find, grabbed her precious logbook, her dossier of proof, and rushed outside. Ignoring the chill morning air, she had to be there. She had to witness the culmination of her efforts, see the treacherous Ken Tanaka led away in handcuffs. She had to make sure the FBI agents knew who was responsible for cracking the case, her. She hurried down the street, bypassing the initial, outer police cordon with a dismissive wave. Fueled by her sense of urgent purpose, she saw the main concentration of FBI activity further down, near Orchard Drive. Agents focused intently on number 217. Confused for only a moment, why weren't they at number 12? She quickly rationalized it. Tanaka must have associates there. A network, of course. She needed to direct them, provide her vital intelligence. She marched towards the primary FBI staging area, dodging equipment cases, ignoring the shouts of local officers trying to maintain the perimeter. Agent in charge, she called out, waving her logbook like a banner. I need to speak to you. I'm Margaret Sterling from number 14 Willow Lane. I'm the one who reported the spy network. A senior FBI agent, coordinating the team securing number 217, turned, his expression a mixture of annoyance and bewilderment at this civilian breach. MAAM, you need to step back immediately. This is a restricted federal crime scene. But the spy, Margaret insisted breathlessly, jabbing a finger back towards her own street, nowhere near the ongoing raid. Ken Tanaka, at number 12, Willow Lane. He's the ringleader. I have documented proof, his movements, his signals, his foreign contacts. You need to arrest him before he escapes." Several nearby agents exchanged uneasy, almost imperceptible glances. They knew Tanaka's role. They knew who this woman was from the pre-operational briefings. Inside the mobile command unit, Kenji heard her shrill voice pierce through the operational chatter on an open radio channel. He felt a cold dread wash over him. She was here. She was doing exactly what they predicted, but with a terrifying lack of restraint. Assistant Director Carmichael, monitoring the entire operation remotely from a secure facility, listened to the unfolding chaos at the perimeter. He swore under his breath. "Protocol Zulu," he commanded tersely into his microphone. "Secure the civilian interference. Now." Before the agents on scene could physically remove Margaret, she spotted him. Kenji Tanaka had stepped briefly out of the mobile command unit to hand a data drive to another plainclothes agent. Though dressed casually, Kenji wore an official FBI lanyard with his credentials clearly visible around his neck. Recognition, then utter dawn uncomprehending fury contorted Margaret's face. "There he is!" she shrieked, her voice cracking with hysteria. She broke away from the agent attempting to gently guide her back, lunging towards Kenji with surprising speed. Her logbook held aloft like a weapon. "THATS him! Tanaka! The spy. He's infiltrated the FBI. Arrest him. He works for the Chines, or the Japanese, or all of them. HE's been signaling from his house for months. I have proof. Deport the traitor. Send him back where he came from." Her xenophobic, venom-loud, unhinged, filled the morning air. News cameras, initially focused on the raid house, swiveled, zooming in on this unexpected, dramatic confrontation. They captured Margaret Sterling, face puce with rage, finger pointed accusingly at a stunned Kenji Tanaka, whose carefully maintained cover was being publicly shredded, live, during a sensitive federal operation. In that instant, the calculated risk crystallized into chaotic reality. FBI agents immediately moved, forming a human barrier between the hysterical woman and their colleague. "MAAM, cease and desist immediately. You are interfering with federal agents in the commission of their duties," the lead agent commanded sharply, his voice leaving no room for negotiation. "Interfering? I'm exposing a traitor," Margaret screamed back, struggling against the agents now firmly restraining her. "He's the enemy. Why are you protecting him? Are you all complicit? This country is being betrayed from within. That's enough," the agent stated, signaling to two other agents who moved in swiftly. "Margaret Sterling, you are under arrest for obstruction of justice, interfering with federal agents, and filing false reports to federal authorities." "Arrest me!" she shrieked again, the reality finally seeming to penetrate her delusional haze, replaced not by understanding, but by sheer, sputtering outrage. "I'm a patriot. A whistleblower. He's the criminal. You can't arrest me. This is treason." She continued to struggle and shout incoherently as the agents expertly handcuffed her, reading her Miranda rights over her increasingly desperate protests. The news cameras rolled, capturing every humiliating moment. The self-proclaimed guardian of Willowbrook Creek, exposed as a raving bigot, arrested by the very agency she believed she was aiding. Her paranoid fantasy collapsing into harsh reality on national television. While Margaret's personal drama unfolded, the raid on 217 Orchard Drive concluded successfully. Several foreign intelligence operatives were apprehended, their sophisticated communications hub dismantled, and critical intelligence assets seized. The operation was a major counterintelligence victory for the FBI. But the story that dominated the headlines, the one that reverberated across the country, wasn't the spy bust itself, but the bizarre sideshow of Margaret Sterling's arrest, hashtag FBISB Karen, hashtag xenophobia arrests self, hashtag not the spy taught, hashtag patriot fail, trended for days. The irony was inescapable. Margaret Sterling, in her obsessive, prejudice-fueled quest to unmask an imaginary spy, had not only tormented an innocent man who turned out to be a dedicated federal agent, but had actively endangered a critical national security operation targeting actual foreign spies. Her vigilance hadn't protected anyone. It had made her an unwitting accomplice to the very forces she claimed to oppose. The legal consequences for Margaret were swift and severe. Federal charges for obstruction of justice during a counterintelligence operation, interfering with federal agents, and multiple counts of filing false reports carried significant prison time. Her defense, that she was a well-meaning citizen acting on legitimate concerns, evaporated against the mountain of evidence, her own letters, her documented harassment campaign, reported by Kenji, and the damning video footage of her unhinged, xenophobic tirade during the arrest. Prosecutors vigorously pursued the case, arguing for hate crime enhancements based on the clear racial and ethnic bias motivating her actions against Kenji. The incident ignited a firestorm of discussion about anti-Asian racism, the dangers of conspiracy theories, and the corrosive effects of xenophobia within seemingly peaceful communities. Asian American advocacy groups seized upon the case, highlighting it as a textbook example of how prejudice, fueled by fear and ignorance, can escalate from microaggressions to dangerous, life-altering accusations. Willowbrook Creek Estates found itself under an uncomfortable national spotlight, its carefully cultivated image shattered. The HOA board issued public apologies, denounced Margaret's actions, implemented diversity training, and quietly revised committee oversight procedures, desperately trying to repair the damage to their reputation. Kenji Tanaka's undercover assignment was necessarily terminated. The public exposure, while validating his experience, compromised his ability to operate covertly. After a thorough debriefing, the Bureau reassigned him to a different role within the Counterintelligence Division. While the premature end to his deep cover was operationally frustrating, there was a grim, undeniable satisfaction in knowing that Margaret Sterling's prejudice had directly led to her own undoing. The Bureau, ever adaptable, incorporated the Sterling incident into its training curriculum, a stark lesson on managing unforeseen civilian interference, the importance of agent security protocols, and the unpredictable threats posed by unchecked bias in the communities where agents operate. Margaret Sterling was convicted on all major federal counts. The judge, in sentencing, delivered a scathing indictment of her actions, emphasizing the potential catastrophic consequences had her interference successfully compromised the raid. The maliciousness of her racially motivated harassment of Agent Tanaka, and the profound arrogance of her belief that her prejudice qualified as patriotism. She was sentenced to several years in federal prison, a sentence reflecting the gravity of obstructing a national security operation. Substantial fines and asset forfeiture proceedings followed, ensuring her financial ruin. Her house at number 14 Willow Lane, the command center for her misguided crusade, was eventually sold to satisfy the judgments against her. Stripped of her status, her home, her freedom, and her self-proclaimed identity as a protector, Margaret Sterling became a symbol of the toxic intersection of ignorance, fear, and prejudice. Her story served as a chilling warning about the dangers of allowing suspicion to fester into paranoia, and the devastating consequences, personal and potentially national. When citizens appoint themselves guardians against imaginary threats based on bigotry rather than facts, the curated quiet eventually returned to Willowbrook Creek, but it was forever tinged by the memory of the morning the FBI came, not for the quiet man at number 12, but for the loud, accusing woman next door.